Holy Land Mary Issei in a quiet garden at the very heart of the world government. 5 elderly men, each with distinct features and a commanding air of authority, were seated around a tea table, casually enjoying a fragrant afternoon tea. The elder wearing a black flat hat, Saturn, sipped his tea and said calmly. Marine headquarters, the 7 warlords of the sea, the 4 emperors, the balance we painstakingly built across the seas has been utterly shattered by Roya. What do you all think? A blonde elder, Peter, gave a disdainful snort. Sengoku's incompetence and cowardice are the true causes of this defeat. Roya may be stronger than Whitebeard, but there's no way he's as powerful as Akina described ending the war alone. Absurd. A bald, beardless elder, Nusjuro, said coldly. Let's not forget the real purpose of this war we orchestrated was to eliminate Whitebeard, and make room for new blood to rise on the seas. And the result? Whitebeard lives, and we've lost both the fleet admiral and a legendary vice admiral. The Shishibukai system is all but dissolved. The long-bearded elder, Mars, nodded in agreement. That's true. But on the other hand Roya has inherited and replaced Whitebeard's reputation and position almost seamlessly. In that sense, our intended outcome was at least half achieved. The price was just, steep. The elder with the walrus mustache, Warkuri, frowned deeply. Then we must act swiftly to restore balance across the seas. He paused, his voice suddenly laced with fear. If this imbalance continues and alarms Imusama, I don't need to explain the consequences. At the mere mention of Imusama, the 5 elders, those who held the highest authority in the world, all fell silent, their expressions turning grim. At that moment, a nervous attendant approached, trembling as he kneeled and bowed deeply. Reporting to the esteemed elders, Blackbeard, one of the remaining 7 warlords, has requested passage through the Holy Land, en route to the New World. The flat hat elder's eyes lit up. Why not go with the flow? Give that ambitious man a little help. Let him grow faster. With his personality, he's sure to wreak havoc across the seas. That could buy us the time and space we need to clean up Sengoku's mess. The others nodded in agreement. The flat hat elder instructed. Grant him passage. Also, prepare 3 flagship-class warships at the New World entrance. Tell him this, I want to see the New World drenched in pirate blood. The attendant shivered from head to toe, bowed again, and retreated backward out of the garden. The bald elder suddenly let out a sigh. If not for the need to keep the world government functioning, these clowns would never have been allowed to run wild on the seas. The long-bearded elder glanced at the blonde one and said with a deep voice. I have a hunch. Roya may be coming for us next. Compared to him, the so-called threat of the will of D is insignificant. The walrus-mustached elder added solemnly. An observation haki bordering on omniscience, mysterious replication and control abilities. This Roya he may not even be fighting at full strength yet. If we place a 6 billion bounty on his head, could that stir competition among the 4 emperors? Make them turn on each other. The others nodded slowly. The 5 elders fell into a heavy silence, only the faint clinking of teacups remained, echoing with unreadable intent. Baltigo, the White Earth Island. Standing side by side in the wind were Emporio Ivankov and Monkey D. Dragon. Dragon pondered aloud. So, your assessment is? Roya is a supporter of order. Ivankov nodded. He definitely leans toward order and authority. Otherwise, he wouldn't have deliberately left Vice Warden Hanyabal alive. Plus, the way he killed Shiryu without hesitation, and showed zero sympathy for the majority of the prisoners. It's clear he has no tolerance for truly vile criminals. He's not like Blackbeard, who recruits scum just to grow stronger. Dragon nodded slightly. While I value freedom, my real issue is the rottenness of today's world government. The world's worst criminals are a byproduct of the government's tyranny and exploitation. So in truth, Roya and I are not ideologically opposed. This world does need true order, but certainly not the kind the celestial dragons are willing to give. Ivankov nodded repeatedly. Roya must have known who I was, yet he still sent Squard to save me personally. But, he also made sure I stayed away from the Marineford War. I wonder if that was intentional. Dragon thought for a moment and said cautiously. Maybe. He anticipated that the war would end in a one-sided rout and didn't want the world government thinking we'd already allied. We still need time to grow. And likely, so does he. So for now it's better not to pressure the world government too hard. Ivankov's wide eyes sparkled with surprise. You mean, he might provoke the one who sits on the empty throne? Dragon drew in a deep breath. Exactly. The empty throne. That individual, is the true foundation of the world government. The celestial dragons are nothing but inbred parasites, feeding off their ancestors' legacy. But that one person, the one who's ruled from the shadows since the era of the 20 kings, that is the real tumor festering on the world. Only by killing them, can we truly overthrow the world government, and return the world to true freedom and order. It's because I learned of their existence that I gave up on reforming the navy from the inside and chose to launch a revolution from the outside instead. Ivankov was deeply shaken and even more fired up. He bowed low. Then I'll set out immediately to continue the search for Nico Robin. If the legends are true, and we find the 3 ancient weapons, we might really be able to end the celestial dragon's corrupt reign. Dragon gave a non-committal nod. No matter what, find Nico Robin. Bring her to me. Thank you. Ivankov saluted and departed quickly. Left alone, Dragon's fierce expression gradually softened. He looked up at the sky and let out a silent sigh. Dash. Back aboard the Moby Dick. The celebration continued in full swing. At the stern of the ship stood Whitebeard and Sengoku, shoulder to shoulder, watching the now distant silhouette of Marineford shrink into a speck on the horizon. On Sengoku's face was a look of peace, something never seen before. He said with a smile. It's strange. Looking at that building from a pirate's perspective now, it really does look like a prison. Whitebeard chuckled and said, a prison? Aren't you Marines just the world government's public face? How could you be a prison? Sengoku let out a self-deprecating laugh. Exactly, the public face. But true justice shouldn't be divided into front and back. Once you step on that path, though, there are too many things you simply can't control. But now, I finally have the chance to step out to walk the world, see it with my own eyes. That's surely more meaningful than being a mask for someone else. Whitebeard burst into hearty laughter. You want to see the world? Then you'd better pick up the pace swabbing the deck. With that, he tossed aside his giant sake barrel and headed for the captain's quarters. Sengoku wasn't offended by the advice. Instead, he turned back to glance at Roya, who was being surrounded by the crew like a shining star. Roya put down his cup. He'd lost count of whether that was his 7th or 8th barrel of heavy liquor. Only after this final drink did the rowdy pirates finally let him go. Slightly tipsy, Roya leaned against the front deck railing, letting the sea breeze wash over him, utterly at ease. Ace stepped away from the celebration and came to his side. He said solemnly. Vice-Emperor Roya, please grant me permission to once again leave the crew to continue hunting down the traitor, Blackbeard. Roya looked back at him with a smile. By now, he's probably already passed through Mary Issei and entered the new world. Ace chuckled too. Then we'll see who's faster, his escape, or my pursuit. Roya nodded. Then I wish you a successful hunt. Ace bowed respectfully. I'll remember your teachings, and continue to train hard. With that, and while the crew was distracted, he quietly launched a small boat and left, alone. Marco approached Roya, concern etched on his face. Vice-Captain. Blackbeard's ambition comes from a very unique body. Father suspects he has an extremely rare physique capable of housing more than one devil fruit. In the new world, it's survival of the fittest. Blackbeard will hunt down pirates and steal the powers he wants. If he finds a fruit that suits him, Ace still might not be a match. Roya smiled. Don't forget what the old man said about Blackbeard. I agree with him. Blackbeard is destined to be nothing more than a whetstone for true kings. If Ace can't even overcome him, then what talk is there of ruling the sea? Marco was about to speak again when Law approached. He held his tongue. Law hesitated for a moment, then said. Lord Roya, I'd like to request your aid in taking Dressrosa. Roya sighed slightly. The feud between you and the Don Quixote family, I won't get involved. Law's hopeful expression dimmed. After a moment of thought, Roya added. But from what I've heard, Doflamingo is involved in some very dirty business. I plan to clean up those dealings. If I happen to run into him while doing so, well, then I'll deal with him. Law's eyes lit up. Then, please allow me to stay aboard your ship. Roya smiled faintly. Everyone has their own purpose, their own reason to live. Once your revenge is fulfilled, and you've figured out your future, then decide whether you want to board my flagship. Law frowned in surprise, then nodded quietly and said no more. Marco sighed. I'd love nothing more than to follow you into the new world, Vice-Captain. But Father still needs me. Taking care of him is probably my reason for living. Royal laughed heartily, clapping Marco on the shoulder. Don't worry. I'll make sure someone brings you all the stories worth knowing. Marco immediately grimaced. Vice-Captain, that's just torture, you know. All three burst into laughter. A short distance away, Eustace Kid watched Royal with a complicated expression. He suddenly turned to Killer beside him and said. We're leaving. Head for the new world immediately. Without looking back, he left the Moby Dick, returning to his own ship. His warship swiftly broke away from the allied pirate fleet and sped toward the Sabayati archipelago. Not far behind, Scratchman Apo approached Drake, grinning. Looks like we were not needed here anymore. Drake replied coldly. Correction, we were never needed here. Apo chuckled. I've got a destination in mind. Plenty of chances to grow stronger. Want to come with me? Drake glanced once more toward Roya and gave a savage grin. If your plan slows me down, I'll cut you down myself. Apo shrugged. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. The two of them returned to their respective ships and headed off into the new world. Wano Country, Onigashima. Kaido tossed aside another newspaper. The ground was already littered with dozens of different issues. Each front page featured the same name, Roya. Articles analyzing his powers from the war. Investigations into his origins. Tabloids speculating about his relationship with the pirate empress. It was endless. The most recent paper bore one full-page image. Roya's latest bounty poster. Kaido scoffed. 6 billion? The world government is as useless as ever. Shame the New World project has already begun. Otherwise, I'd test this guy myself. They're calling him the new head of the 4 emperors. That means he's got no choice now, he'll have to chase the title of Pirate King. I just hope he's not dumb enough to let the 5 elders use him. I'm still waiting for someone to come kill me already. This world is so damn boring. A shattered marine headquarters. Aokiji and Akaina stood facing off. Kizaru lounged nearby, legs crossed. Suddenly, all three stiffened. Aokiji and Akaina dropped their standoff. Kizaru immediately leapt to his feet. All three bowed deeply. A silver-haired, aged man stood before them, his aura still razor-sharp. The elder scanned Aokiji and Akaina with a frown. Is the position of Fleet Admiral so important to you? Instead of restoring the Navy's honor, you're bickering over a title? What a disgrace! The two lowered their heads further, not daring to breathe too loudly. After a pause, the old man ordered coldly. Send out all surveillance ships. I want every move Roya makes tracked. Once Marine HQ is rebuilt, the main fleet will depart immediately. Will exterminate Roya. The 3 admirals bowed once more and spoke in unison. The already restless sea suddenly surged with a violent swell and swirling whirlpools. Within moments, a massive warship burst forth from beneath the waves, breaking through the surface with a deafening roar. A strange light briefly shimmered across the ship's surface, and then it settled steadily atop the water. Though the vessel was a Navy flagship-class battleship, it now flew a distinctly pirate-style flag. At the helm, Jinbei turned the wheel and called out. Set course for Punk Hazard, full speed ahead. Beside him, Sanwan Wolf, still picking his nose, used one massive arm to expertly adjust the sails. Despite the chaotic winds, magnetic fields, and currents of the New World, the bizarre pair navigated with uncanny synergy. The warship maintained full speed, sailing toward a destination not listed on any known chart. In less than half a day, Punk Hazard Island came into view through the spyglass. Law lowered the scope and asked, confused. Lord Roya, this island was designated a forbidden zone by the world government years ago. They say a plague or some extinction-level disaster occurred there. Why are we heading to such a place? Roya smiled calmly. Though it appears abandoned and desolate, with only ruins left on the surface, it actually conceals a massive secret research facility, wherein human experiments have continued in the shadows. Big Mom and Kaido, 2 of the 4 emperors, are among its biggest clients. And Doflamingo, the one you despise, is the one who supplies the facility with test subjects through human trafficking. At these words, Law gritted his teeth so hard they cracked, fury burning in his eyes. This kind of nest of evil must be torn out by the roots. But Jinbei shook his head with a bitter smile. Places like this are far from rare. There are countless such nests in the world. Because the ones behind them are the so-called celestial dragons. Caesar Clown runs the lab, Doflamingo supplies the materials, Kaido buys the results. These people all believe they control their own fates, when in truth, they're just puppets, tools used by the powers behind the curtain to maintain the rotting world order. Roya let out a soft chuckle. No matter who's running it, no matter how noble their backers are, I'll destroy it just the same. That supreme confidence and calm resolve instantly infected everyone on the bridge. Even though this mission would clearly further escalate the conflict with the world government, no one flinched, no one hesitated. Far in the distance, a small Navy surveillance ship cautiously tailed them. On board was a man known in the Marines as a Mad Dog White Hunter Smoker. With 2 fat cigars clamped between his lips, smoke pouring from his mouth, Smoker raised and lowered his spyglass repeatedly, keeping a close watch on Roya's ship. He muttered. This heading, Don't tell me they're going to that forbidden island. After the accident in the science division, wasn't it completely abandoned? What could Roya possibly want there? As Roya's ship dropped anchor and lowered sails, clearly preparing to make landfall, Smoker didn't dare delay. He pulled out his den mushi and immediately called Admiral Aokiji. Admiral Aokiji, I've located Roya. He's preparing to land on the forbidden island Punk Hazard. Among his crew, I've confirmed the presence of Jinbei, Sanwan Wolf, Magellan, Squard, Mackay, Law and several other heavy hitters. Aokiji ended the call and looked to the man sitting beside him, Commander-in-Chief Kong. Kong pondered briefly, then said. Punk Hazard is currently run by a classified research team, coordinated with the Dongquixote family. The island's main project and its key product is artificial devil fruits. The three admirals stiffened visibly. And in an instant, they understood why the world government had declared the island a forbidden zone. If the artificial fruits proved viable at scale, they could become the most terrifying tool of governmental control in history. Imagine, if a disciplined military force like the Navy was mass-equipped with devil fruit powers, what could possibly stand against it? Kong continued coldly. With the strength of Roya and his crew, Punk Hazard won't last long. Prepare the fastest warship we have. I'll personally lead a mission into the new world. We're going to hunt Roya down. His eyes sharpened to blades as he looked over the three admirals Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru. This time, even if it costs your lives, you will kill Roya. I want Punk Hazard, that toxic wasteland, to become Roya's grave. The three looked at one another. They now realized Roya's attack on Punk Hazard had touched the very core of the world government's secrets. It was the only explanation for Kong's urgency. Before the Navy could even recover from its last disastrous defeat, he was preparing for another all-out assault. Sensing their hesitation, Kong added. This time, we'll use a decapitation strategy. We'll concentrate our best forces and strike at Roya directly, seizing a single opening to eliminate him in one blow. Also, I'll reconscript your former instructor Zephyr and recruit 2 new Navy rookies, each equal in strength to an admiral. Hearing Zephyr's name, Kizaru silently groaned. Akainu and Aokiji exchanged glances, stunned that the commander-in-chief would involve rookies in a mission of this scale. New recruits, on par with the admirals? Was that even possible? Kong offered no further explanation. He simply dialed Doflamingo through the den mushi. His tone was icy and commanding. Dongquixote, I'm ordering you to head to Punk Hazard immediately. Delay Roya for at least 2 days. A burst of angry shouting came through the line, but Kong didn't listen. He cut the call abruptly. Then, he slapped the table and barked. Mobilize. Without hesitation, he strode out of the command center toward Crescent Bay's port. The three admirals, seeing his unwavering determination, felt a spark of their lost confidence return. They followed him onto the Navy's fastest warship. Back on his own ship, Doflamingo slammed the den mushi across the room. Old bastard, who the hell do you think you are to order me around? Threads shot out from his body, slicing everything around him to pieces. Once the outburst passed, that familiar twisted smile returned to his face. He turned to his trembling crew and ordered with a grin. A small boat was lowered from the warship. Roya descended lightly from the deck, drifting down like a feather and landing gently on the boat, his presence alone stabilizing the vessel completely. Jinbei and Law followed, leaping down heavily onto the boat. Yet even under their combined weight, the vessel remained perfectly steady, as unmoving as a mountain. Seeing the two of them steady themselves, Roya gave a slight nod. Let's go. Time to land. Jinbei and Law began to row in tandem, driving the small boat swiftly toward Punk Hazard. Back on the warship, the presence of Squard and the others began to completely vanish. The massive Navy flagship took on the eerie aura of a ghost ship, devoid of all signs of life. In a short time, the boat reached a shallow inlet, and the group disembarked. Roya took the lead, heading straight toward the abandoned building complex on the island. The buildings bore obvious signs of corrosion. Though it had only been 3 or 4 years since the incident with the science division, the place looked as though it had been decaying for decades. As they walked through the ruins, occasional tremors stirred up faint purple mists, strange gases that filled the air with an unsettling dread. But Jinbei and Law soon noticed that an invisible barrier emanated from Roya, shielding the three of them. The ominous purple gas couldn't penetrate the barrier at all. Both men, seasoned warriors, quickly noticed something else. Though the ruins appeared deserted, fresh signs of human activity were scattered about. What was strange, though, was the scale of the footprints and debris, far larger than any normal human, approaching the size of giants. Law asked in confusion. The number of footprints here? At least several dozen, maybe over 100. Do giants even gather in numbers like this? Jinbei shook his head. To my knowledge, the giant race is rare, and they tend to be solitary. Even gathering 3 or 5 is rare. 100 giants? That'd be enough to start a revolution against the world government. Law was about to respond when Roya suddenly stopped, as if waiting for something. Both Jinbei and Law halted as well, falling silent and scanning their surroundings carefully. The area appeared to be what was once a large public square, with several streets and alleys converging at the location. Then suddenly the heavy thudding of footsteps rang out from multiple alleyways at once. Law's ears twitched, picking up on the unusual cadence. He looked at Jinbei in surprise only to see the same confusion in his expression. The steps were heavy, yes, suggesting large, powerful bodies, but they were also clumsy, unbalanced, staggering, like children just learning to walk. Even stranger, every set of footsteps was like this. Surely it couldn't be that dozens of toddler-sized giants had all gathered to play here? That thought had barely formed when the source of the noise emerged. Dozens of enormous figures stumbled into the square. Jinbei and Law were stunned speechless, staring wide-eyed at the sight. It really was a group of giants. Some stood over 20 to 30 meters tall, the smaller ones still over 10 meters. But they were unmistakably children. Not children of the giant race but human children, enlarged to gigantic proportions. Jinbei and Law looked to Roya in shock. They had both heard the grim rumors surrounding this island, a haven for human experimentation conducted by the world government's science division using prisoners as test subjects. But they had never imagined things had devolved to the point of experimenting on children, attempting to forcibly gigantify human kids. On the surface, the children seemed happy, chasing and playing without care across the plaza. But both Jinbei and Law felt a deep chill rising in their chests. Instinct told them this unnatural giantification was not as innocent as it looked. The price paid to achieve such bodily transformation must have been terrible. Sure enough, not even 10 minutes passed before something changed. Their play suddenly turned wild, the level of violence escalating exponentially. One child grabbed another and performed a savage over-the-shoulder throw, hurling them into a nearby building. Dust and that same purple gas billowed out from the wreckage. The child who'd been thrown staggered out of the rubble and let out a beast-like roar. Jinbei's face went pale. That child's eyes were now completely white, and within those whites swirled a sinister purple mist. Poisoned. Jinbei gasped, unsure, glancing toward Roya for confirmation. Roya gave a subtle shake of his head, motioning for them to keep watching. The roar seemed to trigger something in the rest. One by one, the other children also descended into madness, entering the same violent, berserker state, attacking everyone and everything around them without reason or control. In the blink of an eye, the plaza became a battleground of shattered bones and crumbling ruins. Jinbei and Law were filled with urgency, wanting to intervene, but without Roya's command, they didn't dare act rashly and risk harming the children further. Just as their restraint reached its breaking point, a squad of heavily suited figures emerged from the surrounding streets. Clad in full protective gear, they wielded strange weapons. With a squeeze of the trigger, purple gas shot out in dense clouds, quickly engulfing the entire square. The berserk children collapsed almost immediately, knocked unconscious. The suited team moved swiftly and in sync, binding the children and hauling them away into the deeper alleys. Only then did Roya move, silently following the group. Jinbei and Law finally understood. Roya had waited, remaining hidden, to follow the trail to its source. His goal wasn't just to stop the rampage, it was to rescue all the children in one move. This island's twisted research base clearly operated with meticulous secrecy, relying on neurotoxic gases as a primary means of control. One false move, and all the children could perish. Only by infiltrating the core without alerting the enemy, locating the central holding facility, and disabling the system, could they truly free the children. And after that, they'd still need to heal their altered bodies and prevent further berserk transformations. This wasn't a task brute force alone could solve, not even with Roya's all-seeing observation haki and overwhelming strength. As they followed the retreating scientists, a massive metal door loomed into view at the end of the alley. They hollowed out the entire base of the island and built an underground facility. As they passed through the massive steel doors, Jinbei released his observation haki but was immediately overwhelmed. He couldn't sense the full extent of the base at all. Its sheer size was unfathomable. Ahead of them, the hazmat-suited guards delivered the unconscious children into a colossal chamber. Inside, a gentle-looking green-haired woman carefully examined each child while clutching a thick notebook, scribbling down data as she went. Elsewhere in the room, another group of over 100 children scrambled and fought fiercely over piles of strangely colored candy. Jinbei and Law immediately connected the dots. This candy had to be the source of the children's mutations. And now, the true villain behind this horrific facility had finally revealed a finger. Roya disabled the cloaking distortion of his observation haki, cleared his throat, and appeared in front of the green-haired woman. Jinbei and Law didn't hesitate, they struck in unison. One punch, one slash, and the entire Hazmat squad was annihilated in seconds. The green-haired woman gasped, stunned by Roya's sudden appearance. That who are you people? Guards. Intruders. We have. She seemed soft and fragile on the surface, but in an instant, a frigid aura exploded from her arms, ice forming rapidly. In the blink of an eye, her arms were coated in thick frost, transforming into gigantic blades of ice, which she then cross-slashed toward Roya. Her voice, once sweet, morphed into a hysterical, manic shriek. You think you can destroy the young master's great work? Die, trash! But Roya didn't dodge. He stood still and let her ice blade arms strike his body directly. For a moment, time froze, the entire room felt suspended in stillness. Then a single crack appeared on the icy blades. In the next second, they shattered into a shower of frozen shards. And along with them her arms vanished. She let out a piercing scream, desperately summoning more frost to form an icy barrier around her as a last defense. Simultaneously, a tornado of blizzards erupted at Roya's feet, attempting to consume him whole. But Roya simply stomped down. A violent shockwave rippled out from the point of contact, precisely striking each energy node, sustaining the blizzard vortex. The snowstorm instantly lost its form and collapsed into silence. Roya calmly raised his hand and fired a razor-sharp Rankyaku blade. It pierced straight through the woman's icy shield, skewering her chest and lifting her off her feet, then continued into the wall behind her. The lingering chill of her powers froze the air blade into a 3-meter-long ice lance, pinning her body against the wall. With a clatter, a den mushi fell from her clothes. Doflamingo's voice crackled anxiously from it. Monet! What's happening over there? Monet's lips moved but no sound came out. She tried again. Still nothing. Realizing she could no longer speak, Monet finally gave up. But a gentle, almost blissful smile formed at the corners of her mouth. Young master, was worried about me. That final sweet thought was forever sealed into her consciousness. Dash. Back on his ship, Doflamingo stared blankly at the pink den mushi frozen in a wide-eyed grimace. He buried his face in both hands and let out a low, muffled sigh. Then came a sound part shriek, part laugh too wild to name. Full speed ahead. Punk hazard now. Dash. As Monet's icy lance melted and her body crumpled to the ground, Jinbei and Law began carefully moving the children onto beds, laying them down more comfortably. The moment they witnessed Monet's death, the children who had moments before fought over candy snapped into a frenzy. But this time, they didn't lose control. Instead, they focused their rage on Roya, launching themselves at him all at once. Roya was prepared. With a calm breath, he expanded his observation haki domain, pushing deep into the children's minds. Within seconds, every child fell into the deepest of slum bears. But Roya knew full well, this was only a temporary solution. The children had developed a severe dependency on the toxins within the candy. If they didn't receive their regular dose, they would spiral into violent rampages. But if they did continue taking it, their bodies would undergo further irreversible mutations, ultimately turning them into mindless giants. Even someone as powerful as Roya couldn't undo the damage the toxin had already inflicted. Until he could formulate a proper antidote, all he could do was keep them in deep sleep, free from withdrawal, and free from pain. Once all the children were stable, the trio exited the room. Roya turned and made a fist gesture. The room's steel door twisted inward, warping into a tangled mess of metal that no one could open again. Just then, an overwhelming presence surged out from the depths of the base. The sheer force of it radiated an impossible hardness, a defense that seemed utterly impenetrable. Jinbei's face went pale. No, could that be Kaido? A single, thunderous footstep answered him. But the source of the noise was still far down the corridor, yet already, a hurricane-force wind howled through the hallway. With it came a nauseating stench, so vile and overpowering that Jinbei and Law nearly collapsed where they stood. They quickly held their breath, struggling not to vomit. Their minds screamed in terror. That smell, only carnivorous beasts that feed on humans reek like this. What the hell kind of monster is coming? Suddenly, a massive head emerged from the shadows of the corridor. Fanged jaws. Twisting horns. Golden slit eyes, gleaming with pure, monstrous malice. The creature's head filled the entire corridor, leaving no room to pass. Black scales shimmered with an oily sheen, overlapping perfectly like armor. The unbearable pressure of its presence, the sensation that nothing could harm it, poured from those scales. A dragon. A creature of legend, of myths. Jinbei's thoughts spiraled as his voice failed him. He stared, speechless, as the beast from fairy tales, a living dragon, stood before them, real and breathing. Shocked and instinctively reacting, Law struck first. His cursed blade, Kikoku, erupted in a dazzling surge of electricity, vibrating at high frequency as he thrust it toward the dragon's right eye. But flames of fury immediately ignited in the dragon's eye. Its massive eyelids slammed shut in a flash, trapping the blade between its eyelids just before it could strike. Worse yet, the flames in its eye traveled up the blade, rushing toward Law's right hand. Law hastily withdrew, trying to shake the fire off. But no matter how he swung it, the fire wouldn't go out. Within mere seconds, Kikoku had turned red-hot, nearly melting, its blade resembling molten metal. Panicked, Law dropped the searing hot sword, unable to hold it any longer. When he looked back up, his heart sank. The flames in the dragon's eyes had now spread across every scale on its face. Red fire burst from each of the black dragon scales, quickly transforming the massive head into a blazing inferno. And in the dragon's eyes, the flames had now turned an eerie golden color, flickering with pure disdain, a scornful, inhuman contempt for what it clearly saw as lowly creatures. The dragon opened its enormous maw. The air instantly heated, and a harsh stench of sulfur filled the corridor. Jinbei's expression changed drastically. He planted his feet into a wide stance and moved in front of Law. Just as he did, a torrent of flame breath erupted from the dragon's jaws. In a narrow, sealed corridor, the effects of that breath were amplified many-fold. The flames bounced off every surface, walls, ceiling, floor, ricocheting and converging into a multi-layered inferno, combining searing heat and explosive impact. And at the very front of it stood Jinbei. He inhaled deeply, despite the oppressive heat, and gathered all his strength. Armament Haki instantly wrapped around his right fist. Fishman Karate Secret Technique Karakusa Gawara, Seiken, Demon Brick Fist. Jinbei's most powerful strike, his entire strength compressed into a single point on his fist. He struck directly at the center of the dragon's fiery breath, dispersing the force before it could engulf them. The redirected energy spread outward, forming a net-like pressure wall across the entire corridor, absorbing the raging flames and sending them rebounding in reverse. A sudden whooshing vacuum filled the space. The returning flames rushed backward only to be gulped down by the dragon, who opened its jaw wide and swallowed its own fire. Then, the dragon retracted its head, revealing the vast open chamber at the end of the corridor. There its full form was finally visible. It was colossal. Its entire body was covered in black, glistening scales that shimmered like obsidian. Its rear legs were as thick as ancient tree trunks, the muscles taut and brimming with power. Its forelimbs, flexible and jointed with its massive wings, served both offensive and aerial maneuvering functions. Though its wing membranes appeared thin, they shimmered with an unearthly glow, clearly hinting at durability far beyond their appearance. What truly struck terror, though, were the 3-meter-long bone spikes extending from the joints of its wings and forelimbs. Covered in vicious barbs, even a graze would cause serious injury. A full stab? Death. The dragon then curled its snout into a highly anthropomorphic sneer, spread its wings, and let out a deafening roar. Its cry shook the entire space, a primal, bone-rattling sound, amplified by the enclosed chamber. But more than anything, its expression, its battle precision, and its roar made something abundantly clear. This was no mindless beast, it was intelligent. Highly intelligent. Law's knees buckled, his courage nearly abandoning him. Jinbei, stunned, murmured. I heard they were experimenting with artificial devil fruits here. Could this dragon really be the result of a creature from myth, actually created by science? Law's eyes widened with realization. It's Kaido. Remember, Kaido's devil fruit gives him a blue eastern dragon form. Though this dragon is very different in appearance. The defensive scales, the fire breath, they're almost identical to Kaido's powers. Even before he finished, the black dragon attacked. Its massive forelimbs slammed down, compressing the air beneath its wings. The pressure was so intense that the ground seemed to tremble, and everyone struggled just to stay upright. Jinbei swiftly launched another Karakusa Gawara, dispersing the wind pressure just in time. But from the corner of his eye a black blur flashed. It moved so fast it looked like a streak of darkness, a horizontal swipe faster than the eye could track. It was the dragon's razor-sharp forearm, hidden beneath the wing, slicing sideways at incredible speed. The claws moved like a master swordsman's triple blade strike, slicing across from right to left with deadly force. In that instant, Jinbei didn't retreat, he charged forward. He stepped in just before the claws reached him, moving into the dragon's chest range. With a twist and a spin, he caught the incoming limb and locked it. Fishman Jujutsu, rising tide shoulder throw. Despite the dragon's colossal size, tons in weight, Jinbei's expertly executed grappling technique made it look like a light toy. With a thunderous whoosh, the dragon was hurled across the room. Boom! The dragon's massive body slammed into the metallic wall, shaking the entire underground base. Screech! A piercing screech of claw against metal echoed as the beast rose, leaving a huge gouge in the wall where it had struck. It had been thrown hard. Now truly enraged, the dragon's head ignited in red flame once more. In seconds, its entire body was engulfed in fire. The once black-scaled dragon was now ablaze, transformed into a flaming crimson WYRM. Its enormous hind legs kicked off the wall, launching its body like a cannonball. An infernal wind swept the chamber, heat roaring across the space. Even someone as tough as Jinbei was forced to raise both arms to shield his face, peeking through the gap to track the incoming strike. And then, the fire dragon flared its wings, driving them forward with explosive force. From the edges of its wings, two massive bone spears, wreathed in flame, shot toward Jinbei and Law like flaming lances of death. Jinbei and Law froze in horror, trying to evade, but it was too late. A flash of light at the corner of their eyes and Roya had already positioned himself between them and the dragon's spears. The twin bone spikes of the Crimson Dragon were halted by an invisible barrier and couldn't get any closer. Stopping a dragon with bare hands. Now that's true romance for a man. Jinbei exhaled, admiration in his voice. The dragon's contemptuous gaze shifted to shock and absolute astonishment. With its full strength, even sneezing required caution to avoid destroying the facility walls yet. This insignificant human puppet had simply withstood its full force assault. Still in disbelief, the dragon didn't hold back. It inhaled deeply, causing the very air around it to be drawn inward. Then, with malicious glee in its golden eyes, it unleashed another inferno of flame breath, engulfing everything before it. You pathetic humans, always so full of yourselves. As the flames subsided, the dragon reverted to its black-scaled form, yet its posture still oozed smug triumph. That smugness shattered in an instant. The dragon recoiled, pupils narrowing in terror. It realized, its prized bone spikes had crumbled to dust, reduced to nothing by extreme heat. And the splintering spread rapidly from its wings. In a panic, the dragon backed away, hoping to free itself from the destruction, but the airflow only accelerated the disintegration of its bone modules. Within moments, the damage spread across its chest and abdomen. Cornered, pressed against the metal wall, the dragon could no longer hold together, it shattered. In about 10 seconds, the once mighty beast was flattened, its fragments reduced to a pile of dust, losing all shape. Jinbei and Law visibly relaxed. Roya looked up at the ceiling and grinned. Since you're here, come out and drain the toxins from those kids. I might let you leave with your corpse intact. From the ceiling vent, a swirl of pale purple gas drifted down. It coalesced into a gas-form silhouette. Caesar Clown, the mastermind behind this underground lab, and the dragon they'd just defeated had arrived. He floated down, circling Roya, admiringly sighing. Perfect body, perfect energy response. No wonder so many muscle relaxants failed on you. If I could replicate your body combined with any of my man-made devil fruits, I'd create humanity's strongest bioweapon. Even if I just used you, the engineering on that would make Vegapunk look like an amateur. Enthralled by his own words, Caesar spun in the air a few times and suddenly clasped his hands behind his back. And now, I shall begin. He pointed his finger at Roya and summoned a fast-moving dark purple gas column toward him. It coiled like a venomous snake and enveloped Roya in seconds. Don't worry, I'm using my masterful gas lasso. Just enough toxin to sedate you. It seeps into your pores but won't damage a single cell. Your body is too perfect, I wouldn't even dare. Jinbei and Law exchanged disgusted glances at Caesar's perverse boast and realized why Roya had let him act. He was here to analyze Caesar's gas-based devil fruit powers, neutralize them, and save the children without injury. Caesar smirked, thinking he'd triumphed. But Roya just smiled back and said quietly. Try every toxin you've got. As you said, my body is perfect. No normal poison will work. In an instant, Roya's pores acted like countless vacuum pumps, inhaling Caesar's gas lasso clean through. Caesar froze and hissed in disbelief. He smirked, undeterred, sending 5 times the toxin next, but this time, Roya just inhaled that too, as though nothing had happened. Caesar's eye twitched, he ground his teeth. Fine. You forced my hand. He flicked a poisoned dart, its hollow shaft glowing a sickly purple. Roya merely raised a finger and the dart paused midair. Caesar gasped. The dart began dividing, splitting into 3 parts in midair. The tip and tail fell to the ground, while the central toxin-filled capsule hovered in perfect control. Caesar stared, dumbfounded. Is that telekinesis? Roya didn't respond. With a subtle gesture, the toxin capsule exploded. In a flash, it turned from liquid to gas and disappeared. Roya extended his observation haki, capturing the airborne toxin, stabilizing it, deciphering its composition. Just a few seconds later, he released the haki. The toxin had fully metamorphosed into harmless energy and then dissipated. Caesar, already sweating through his gas form, tried to flee up the vent but it was too late. A powerful suction from Roya's palm drew him in and he realized, in pure horror. Every toxin in his system was being pulled out like a stallion wrangled at the bit. At the rate it was going, in 2 minutes at most, he would be nothing but pure, harmless air, no toxin, no body. It's over. Damn you, Doflamingo, what horrifying enemy did you unleash? Caesar trembled in terror, cursing his nominal master in his heart while awaiting the moment of his demise. Suddenly, from one corridor, a burst of rapid footsteps echoed. Caesar's heart leaped with hope. It was Vice Admiral Fergo, the Navy officer secretly assigned to ensure his safety. Before Caesar could breathe, several powerful air currents shot through the corridor. They even deftly bypassed Jinbei and Law, targeting the vital points on Roya's back. A flanking attack, a strategic distraction for Caesar. Jinbei, momentarily stunned by the footfall, shifted his attention but the swift air streams past him. He thought in alarm. That's Gatling-style finger gun air blasts. A Navy man refined 6 powers to such a level. This level of skill is nearly on par with Admiral Garp himself. The jets struck Roya's back. Caesar thought, now that he's hurt, I can free myself. But shockingly, the currents traced up Roya's arm and plunged into his body, nearly dispersing Caesar's gas form in the process. Even as these torrents of air discharged into him, Roya's palm grip on Caesar remained unbroken. Faced with these paradoxical forces, Caesar realized in horror. Roya's power is at least 5 times what I expected. A body like his, no mere mortal such as me can rival it. Thank goodness Fergo's here. I still have a chance to escape. With that, Caesar covertly activated his ultimate control ability, Voidless World. Silently, he siphoned the surrounding air, compressing it within himself. Just then, Fergo arrived wrapped in a purple-black shell of armament haki. His defense maximized, his 6 powers amplified. Jinbei lunged forward to stop him, but Fergo's strength defied belief. Using tremor-precise footwork, he stamped a bowl-sized crater into the metallic floor while evading Jinbei's blow. Another moment and he had passed by Law, even before Law could swing Ghost Blade. A mid-level vice admiral in a remote marine base, yet his matter-defying prowess rivaled the fleet admirals. Jinbei stared at the insignia on Fergo's uniform, realization dawning. This man's power far eclipses the admirals, if not for lacking a devil fruit. He would overshadow them entirely. Fergo drew a bamboo flute from thin air, instantly encased it in armament haki, and began spinning it like a deadly sledgehammer. Then slammed it toward Roya's nape in a single, brutal strike. Thud. The impact was solid. Fergo grinned, feeling the recoil, sure he had landed a critical blow. Caesar exhaled with glee, certain the attack would draw Roya's full attention, concealing Caesar's ultimate plan. But the next moment, the flute shattered instantly, exploding into thousands of hair-thin splinters. Fergo, caught mid-strike, roared and raised his arms to shield himself, then triggered the ultimate evasive 6 powers, paper art. In an instant, he phased through Roya's flank. And the bamboo splinter web stayed suspended unseen, frozen in space. Fergo's haki dissipated entirely. His body shook violently, fine shock lines of blood appearing across his torso. He lowered his head and glanced at his chest, then sighed heavily. From Roya's vantage, Caesar saw Fergo frozen like a statue, confused and immobile. Caesar realized, my voidless world is almost at its limit. One more breath, an observation haki could detect the missing air. But hesitation meant total failure. Then, in an instant, it was decided. Fergo's lower body shattered, bursting into innumerable microscopic cubes that fell to the ground. His upper form remained briefly, then collapsed into his own pool of blood. Caesar, his will quivering, quietly released all the air he had stored. Roya cast a contemptuous glance his way. Go ahead, test it. See if I faint from lack of air. Cold sweat rolled down Caesar's vaporous forehead. On the floor, Fergo struggled forward, driven to avoid drowning in his own blood. Despite his fate, a fanatical smile crept across his face. Spitting blood, he gasped. My Lord Doflamingo! I have not failed you. I held him off till you returned. Even as his head slumped, he passed with a look of serene satisfaction. Well done, Roy, really well done. Doflamingo kicked aside a careless underling, crushed the drooping den mushi beneath his boot until it was rubble, and watched strands of his devil fruit's parasitic threads pour out non-stop under his feet. As he strode toward the entrance of the underground lab, the threads wove a vast net across the entire Punk Hazard Island, ensnaring it completely. Crossing into the shadows of the base's entrance, his footsteps grew stiff and measured. Roya dropped the now completely transparent Caesar clown's form, then swept back along the path they had come. With all of Caesar's toxins now secured, Roya could decode an antidote to save the children. The mad scientist was useless and broken. Caesar, stuck in his gaseous state, could no longer restore his flesh and blood body, and was quickly dissolving into the air. After Roya, Jinbi, and Law departed, Caesar's form vanished entirely, drawn into the ventilation system without a trace. Back in the room with the children, Roya pinched a drop of clear liquid from his fingertip and gently placed it on each child's forehead. A soft glow radiated from their brows and quickly spread through their bodies. The hypnotized children awoke, their eyes no longer clouded with madness, but sparkling with the innocence of their true ages. Jinbi sighed quietly, their futures are gone. Even if they return to their families, I doubt they'll ever be accepted again. Law, recalling his own past suffering, nodded gravely. What worries me most is, someone with ill intent might abduct them again, using other means to control them as living weapons. He shook his head, there are too many ways to manipulate people besides this damned toxin. A voice echoed from the hallway, no need to worry any longer for today, all of you are going to die. Doflamingo said, stepping into the doorway. He paused, visibly impressed, Hey! These children are in far better shape than I expected. You do have some skills, Roya. His tone turned mocking, come, serve me. Show your loyalty and earn everything you want. Jinbi and Law tensed, disgusted by his demand. Serve him? They thought. Just because he's descended from the celestial dragons? Didn't Roya make it clear what he thinks of them? Roya let out a quiet breath. The only reason you and your kind still exist is because you're scattered across the world. He paused, then continued coldly, eliminate you one by one, they'd just be delays. If you'd just kill yourself from the start, we'd save time. He raised his fist gently, but with authority. The metal ceiling trembled and split open, a 10-meter wide hole appearing overhead. Through that gap, Roya smiled at the children and said, all right, everyone get out through here. Go back to the ship and wait for me, okay? The children nodded excitedly and clambered up through the ceiling's opening, chattering and laughing as they disappeared into the light above. With them safely away, Roya turned toward Doflamingo again. Calmly, he said, I gave you enough time to set your parasitic threads just to let you marinate in your illusion of world domination before you die. Give it your all. He paused, voice low and steady, then go to your death in peace. He leaned his finger in the air and lightly snapped, breaking a single, translucent thread with pinpoint accuracy. The snapped thread whipped 10 times at Jinbi and Law. They trusted Roya completely, so they didn't flinch or dodge. They waited to see what would happen. In truth, they hadn't even noticed the thread until it snapped. Its trembling motion on snapping caught their peripheral vision. Suddenly, 50 parasitic threads whipped around them. Law looked in terror at Doflamingo's hands and recognized the familiar gesture, thumb touching middle finger, the classic posture for controlling his parasite force. A cold sweat ran down his face. Damn Doflamingo, he's refined his skill to the point that you can't even tell when you're hit. He and Jinbi exchanged a glance, both silently backing away. This was no longer a fight they could intervene in. Doflamingo's parasite lines were relentless. If Jinbi or Law got stuck, they'd be turned into puppets, just luggage, burdens on Roya, no use at all. Doflamingo cracked a twisted grin. Smart eyes evading even my invisible lines with that observation haki. He regarded them with chilling delight. But since you decided to save those two idiots, I'll just use them as my stepping stones to get to you. With that, he raised his right index finger sharply. A thick parasitic thread shot out toward Law's chest, his signature string shot. Law, already anticipating its power, instantly sprang forward and drew his black blade. The blade crackled with electric brilliance. The thread shot straight but at the last moment, veered around the blade's edge, like water flowing around a rock. It slid past the sharp edge onto the flat side of the blade, still aimed straight at Law's heart. Its twisting motion did nothing to slow its speed. Law froze, heart pounding with primal fear of death. He felt his chest go cold as the thread slid through. Even though it was translucent, he sensed its passage through his flesh. This is spatial misalignment. His observation haki let him detect its presence. He exhaled in relief, knowing Lord Roya had saved him again at the last possible moment. Doflamingo sneered in amusement. Impressive ability, your observation haki spots my lines. His grin grew more feral. He raised the other hand and shot another thread, this one aimed straight for Jinbi's forehead. Jinbi braced low in horse stance and unleashed a straight punch at the incoming string attack. Doflamingo sneered. Let's see if, Roya, your power is truly limitless. He smirked, continuing, for me, using my strings costs almost nothing. Before Jinbe's punch could connect, Doflamingo reflected the string, twisting it around the punch and launched a second strike right at Jinbe's face. Jinbe grunted, his unexpectedly agile frame twisting back into his horse stance mid-movement, narrowly dodging the string just in time. Doflamingo spurned, his finger flicking. The string curled downward and struck at the back of Jinbe's skull. Fool, he barked, I told you, manipulating strings doesn't tire me. How long can your stamina hold up under this intense movement? Jinbe twisted again, spinning with incredible speed and springing away from the assault once more. Roya chuckled from the side. Here's a secret, with Jinbe's current mastery of advanced life return, he can outlast you, until you burn out. Doflamingo snorted, waste me in an attrition fight? Fool! He thrust both hands forward, fingers spreading, and erupted 9 more deadly string shots from his remaining digits. The threads wove into a three-dimensional net converging on Jinbe. It would be impossible to dodge 10 precision-strung attacks except Jinbe, even with his fluid movement, had no clear escape path. Steadying himself, Jinbe dropped into horse stance and tucked his fists by his waist. Then he closed his eyes to face 10 simultaneous string shots head-on. With a single breath, he thrust both fists outward. From each extended fist burst 2 invisible concussive pulses, guided by his observation haki, each intercepting a string. Doflamingo's expression shifted to sheer concentration. He loosed all 10 strings, their speed doubling, directions shifting erratically. Dozens of sharp thwacks echoed as Jinbe's pulses met each string precisely. No matter how Doflamingo twisted his lines, Jinbe's fists blocked them all. His face darkened, rage flaring. That's enough! Doflamingo roared, clenching fists and preparing a new move. At that moment, Jinbe's 10 separate punches converged, flowing like a soaring swan and a swift, sinuous dragon into a single devastating strike. It hammered directly at Doflamingo's face. Bam! The impact sent Doflamingo flying back, smashing into the metal wall behind him. The punch cut a half-meter crater into the solid surface. Only then did Jinbe open his eyes and bow deeply to Roya. Roya smiled approvingly. Excellent control. Start incorporating your armament haki next. Law watched, envious. Jinbe's physical prowess was unmatched. Law would focus more on enhancing his devil fruit skills. From the cracked wall, a low laugh rose, the faint, mocking voice of Doflamingo. A single string drifted out, weaving him back together. Jinbe scowled. No wonder Lord Royal wouldn't engage. He knew Doflamingo was merely a puppet. Everyone knew Doflamingo had mastered the string marionette technique, but this was the first time they'd ever seen it weaponized to such a terrifying extent. His puppet was indistinguishable from the real man, just as deadly as any fruit user. Thankfully, Doflamingo feared for his own life, so he rarely deployed this puppet, relying on it for combat while his real body stayed hidden. Otherwise, his true mastery of strings would have overwhelmed Jinbe. Doflamingo chuckled with brutish confidence, training me with your new tricks? Fool! He raised claws with 10 strings unfurling from his fingertips, each one a razor-sharp, prehensile weapon. With a leap, the puppet closed the gap to Jinbe, lunging claws toward his skull and chest. The corresponding strings whipped and slashed, twisting and transforming at high speed, converting claw-like edges into piercing tendrils. Jinbe inhaled deeply and crossed his arms, the perfect defensive stance. His gaze fixed on the shifting sinuous threads. All his strength remained coiled, ready to respond. Doflamingo's lips curled into a wicked grin. Then he brought up his left foot and 5 more strings shot from his toes, hesitating midair. A rising kick of unseen strings ascended toward Jinbe's torso. Jinbe froze. The puppet had exploited a trick no normal human foot could deploy with a simultaneous hand strike. This puppet had no physical constraints. Jinbe found himself trapped. If he blocked the rising strings with a leg, he'd expose his hands to Doflamingo's claw attack. If he protected his hands, the kick would pierce him. In that flash of a moment, Jinbe made the most rational move. With a sudden explosion of power, his right fist surged forward, blasting toward the thread on Doflamingo's left claw. At the same time, using the recoil from the blow, his elbow shot upward to intercept the incoming right claw aimed at his head. This way, no matter how Doflamingo's twin attacks changed, Jinbe could deflect them both as best as possible, minimizing any potential injury. Simultaneously, riding the momentum from his earlier parry, Jinbe swung his left fist downward in a vicious arc. The sheer force of this blow surpassed even the right by over 50%, crashing down toward Doflamingo's sweeping left leg. Jinbe's strategy was clear: use the recoil from this strike to create distance, then launch a powerful area-based attack to overwhelm finesse with brute strength, compensating for his own disadvantage in flexibility compared to the ever-shifting threads. But unexpectedly, when the punch landed, it felt like punching into cotton. There was no impact at all. Not only did the expected counterforce vanish, it even threw off Jinbei's form. He staggered, nearly face-planting on the ground. And the elbow strike from earlier? It missed its mark entirely. With a sinister laugh, Doflamingo's thread on his left claw abruptly extended again, this time, finally striking toward the top of Jinbei's skull. Jinbei felt a sharp chill crawl across his scalp as the desperate realization hit, I'm about to get my skull pierced. In the critical moment, he surged his armament haki without restraint toward the top of his head, forming a powerful helmet of hardened haki to protect his vital point. Screech! A piercing sound rang out. Jinbei felt a jarring shock on his scalp. The haki-formed helmet was being shredded by the thread. Fortunately, the thread's energy was depleted in the process and dissipated entirely. Cold sweat poured down his back, but he had at last barely escaped death from Doflamingo's endless dirty tricks. As he quickly retreated, Jinbei thought to himself, this guy's special status clearly isn't just from being a celestial dragon's descendant, he's genuinely got some frightening skills of his own. This mixture of feints and unpredictability, it's practically impossible to defend against. But if, as Lord Roya says, Haki and Devil Fruit powers are simply different manifestations of energy, then what if I try simulating threads using armament Haki? Fight flexibility with flexibility. At that thought, Jinbei suddenly spread his hands wide, 10 fingers flaring. 10 streaks of armament Haki extended from his fingertips, reaching barely an inch beyond them. Controlling armament Haki this way, it's really hard. He felt a pang of frustration. Barely an inch of reach, and certainly nowhere near as fluid or versatile as actual threads. But even this attempt was enough to leave Doflamingo utterly stunned. He froze mid-pursuit and exclaimed in disbelief. You can shape armament Haki during external projection. What Jinbei had just done far exceeded common understanding of armament Haki. Yes, external projection was known, but typically it exploded out like a volcanic blast, forming barriers or shockwaves. But projecting it like thread this fine, this focused? This was a first. Even if Jinbei hadn't succeeded completely, the very act shook Doflamingo's beliefs to their core. In that instant, Doflamingo realized this might have been Jinbei's first time even trying it. And if given a few more attempts, he might actually replicate the abilities of my string fruit. A sudden revelation hit him, this must be the foundation of Roya's mysterious ability to replicate others' techniques. He looked again at Roya, still standing there, calm and indifferent, and panic began to grip his heart. His body trembled, and suddenly unraveled into a long, nearly invisible thread, surging toward a crack in the ceiling. Roya snorted coldly. You came all this way, and now you want to leave. Even if I let you go, do you really think Kong will forgive you for failing your mission? The thread, already halfway into the wall, suddenly trembled, caught by an unseen force pulling it back from the tip. It couldn't advance a single inch more. Dragged back by an invisible hand, it slammed to the ground and reformed into Doflamingo's body once again. Roya continued coldly. You thought I didn't know that Kong sent you to stall for time. You thought I didn't know your real body was racing to relocate the artificial devil fruit production line. You wondered why I hadn't acted yet. The puppet, his string clone, was trembling violently, mirroring Doflamingo's rising terror with perfect accuracy. Because, far away in another part of the base, the real Doflamingo, who was overseeing the relocation of the production line, suddenly realized something horrifying. His connection to the string clone was becoming eerily tighter. His real body was starting to turn into thread without his control. Thread transformation of the body was supposed to be part of his next stage evolution. But now it was happening on its own without cause or warning. There wasn't a shred of excitement. Only overwhelming dread. Every single thread his body had turned into was out of his control. Every emergency failsafe he'd prepared, all the threads hidden across the base, were now acting on their own. He could still feel them, they were still connected to him, but somehow, Roya had taken complete control over them through means Doflamingo couldn't even comprehend. At last, Doflamingo realized he had never even scratched the surface of Roya's true power. And now, it was far too late for regrets. Within his senses, all of his threads suddenly began to move. They weaved in complex, precise patterns, lightning fast, impossibly ordered. Seconds later, they stopped. And what Doflamingo sensed next made his heart collapse. Every one of his subordinates, every staff member in the secret base, sliced to pieces. The research facility, the culmination of years of toil from elite scientific minds, was reduced to shreds. The artificial devil fruit production line, annihilated. The experimental data, reduced to ash. Personnel, machinery, knowledge, all gone in the blink of an eye. The results of years of investments, all wiped out. But there wasn't even time for grief or rage. because his real body had now been completely absorbed into the string clone. Ever since developing the string clone technique, Doflamingo, paranoid to the core, had never allowed his true body to appear before anyone other than a few trusted insiders. But now, that very clone had turned into a prison, entrapping him fully before Roya. Roya gazed at the frantically struggling string inside the puppet, slamming about, trying and failing to escape. With a sneer, he said, "And you dare to proclaim you'll be king of the world, looking like this?" A large ship, flying no insignia or flag, cut through the waves and approached the seas near Punk Hazard. At its bow stood Kong, the supreme commander of all the marines, gazing into the distance at a massive navy flagship on the horizon. Behind him stood two men, one on either side. Though both wore nothing more than standard marine recruit uniforms, the fact that they were accompanying the highest-ranking officer in the navy and participating in the operation to eliminate Roya made it clear, these two were anything but ordinary. One of them had narrow eyes and two deep, fearsome scars crossing his face. But even so, his expression radiated kindness. Kong frowned slightly and asked, "Fujitora, anything strange about that warship?" Fujitora furrowed his brow and replied in a low voice, "Seems like a bunch of innocent kids playing on board. I didn't sense anything dangerous." Kong's expression remained completely unchanged, as if he were oblivious to the web of secrets on Punk Hazard. The other man, a young man with long, wavy black hair, chuckled. "Fleet Admiral, aren't you being a little too cautious? We're just mopping up a bunch of pirates. Why go to all this trouble?" Surprisingly, Kong answered patiently. "Don't underestimate this, Green Bull. Roya's strength can only be described as unfathomable. That's why I must approach this battle with absolute caution. If my carelessness gets any of you killed, I would never forgive myself. In short, you must be prepared to fight to the death. Otherwise, we won't fare any better than Sengoku did." Farther back on the deck, Kizaru pursed his lips with a rare grimace. Akainu stood silent, eyes fixed on the gentle ripple of the sea, deep in thought. Suddenly, a navy warship marked with the word trainee barged into the area without warning. Without so much as a word, it charged directly toward the warship Roya had brought with him. Even from hundreds of meters away, it opened fire. Kong watched the events unfold, completely unable to stop them. He slammed his palm onto the rail with a loud bang, yelling in fury. "Zephyr, that bastard! He's never understood the meaning of following orders. If you're going to ignore the plan, don't blame me for using you as cannon fodder." Dozens of cannonballs whistled through the air. At least 7 or 8 landed within the range of Roya's ship's deck. The children on board, too numerous and large to be housed inside, had been gathered on the deck. In an instant, they were plunged into mortal danger. Though their bodies had been gigantified by toxins, that didn't mean they could withstand naval artillery. And having spent their lives trapped on the island, these kids had no understanding of naval warfare or the danger of cannon fire. They simply stared, blank and helpless, at the incoming shells. Then whoosh, a figure leapt from below deck, flickering midair, vanishing and reappearing repeatedly. In a blink, he passed through the entire bombardment zone, before landing steadily on the deck. Only then did the first cannonball he had knocked away with the sheath of his blade finally crash into the sea. The rest rained down like dumplings one by one, harmlessly splashing into the water. Fujitora's ears twitched, and he muttered in amazement. "Such incredible speed!" Kong took a deep breath and nodded. "That's the Whirl Spider, Squad Roya's strongest known swordsman." Green Bull snorted. "What good's just being fast? He can't even break through defenses. I could stand still and let him slash me until he drops from exhaustion." Akainu scoffed. "He can slice clean through my magma form in one strike. If you think he's only fast, you might want to rethink that." Green Bull dismissed it with a shrug. "Exactly, that proves he's only got speed. 'Cause if it were me cutting you instead, you'd be dead already. TCH. You three should be grateful. If I wasn't too lazy to act, none of you would have ever made Admiral." Kong coughed lightly to shut down Green Bull's smug mockery. "We're boarding. Let's see how this plays out." As he spoke, Zephyr had already leapt across the dozens of meters between ships, landing right in front of Squad. He raised his seastone-infused mechanical arm, the Crusher, and without a word, unleashed a full barrage. From its core, a storm of seastone bullets erupted, covering the area in a torrential downpour of death. A few of the nearby children, caught within the spray, were suddenly in danger. Squad squinted slightly. He could tell immediately that these bullets were not ordinary. He drew his blade and began to slash with dazzling speed. Each swing of his sword struck a bullet dead center with such exact force that it perfectly neutralized their velocity and dropped them to the deck without further harm. One man. One blade. He single-handedly sealed off the entire bullet storm of the Crusher. Rather than angered, Zephyr looked thrilled. Grinning savagely, he pulled a vial of stimulant from his pocket and inhaled it deeply. Your swordsmanship is the fastest and most precise I've ever seen among pirates. Now, let's see if you've got the strength to back it up. With that, his right arm tensed. The crusher rumbled, gathering terrifying force, then struck straight at Squard. No flourish, no tricks, just raw power. Squard's lips curled into a cold smile. He sheathed his blade and assumed an III stance. Just as the crusher was barely an inch from his forehead. Shing! With a deafening crack, he unleashed a slash. The shockwave of metal on metal burst out from the two as the epicenter. The next moment, Squard's sword shattered into pieces. It had been a standard blade, ordinary steel. It simply couldn't endure a head-on clash with sea stone force. Seeing this, Zephyr's smile grew wider. He drew back his arm to strike again. But suddenly froze. There on the surface of the crusher was a massive crack, more than an inch deep. Had it been made of anything other than sea stone, that single slash might have taken his life. And as he recoiled, the crack spread like a spider web within seconds. It had engulfed the entire mechanical arm. Zephyr stared in disbelief as his treasured weapon fractured piece by piece, falling to the deck like broken glass. Only now did he realize. He had lost. Completely. He had attacked with a sea stone war machine. Squard had blocked with a plain sword. Both weapons were destroyed. But the outcome was clear. Zephyr had come out the loser. Zephyr looked down at his right arm, which hadn't been without the crusher for ages, his face filled with disbelief. At that moment, the island suddenly shook with a deep, thunderous tremor. Kong let out a silent sigh. He said gravely. Let's go. There's nothing more to watch here. That tremor must have come from thread-based destruction collapsing part of the structure. That means Doflamingo and Roya are already locked in combat. Let's move. 6 figures leapt from the deck, one after another, racing toward Punk Hazard. Royal leapt upward, soaring through the gaping hole in the ceiling he had opened earlier, landing smoothly on the surface. The Shadow Rider's string puppet followed close behind, dragging its true master, Don Quixote Doflamingo, whose body remained helplessly bound within its core, unable to resist. Jinbei and Law climbed up from below just in time to witness 6 imposing figures breaking through the perimeter of the ruined battlefield. 3 of them were well-known faces, the Navy's 3 admirals, with whom they'd just clashed days earlier. The other 3 were unfamiliar, but their aura was so overwhelming that it made even the admirals seem lesser by comparison. At that moment, Fujitora raised his sheathed sword and pointed diagonally to the sky. A strange gravitational pull surged forth from his blade, connecting with a distant meteor from outer space. With a forceful slash downward, he directed the meteor to come crashing down, hurtling straight for Royal like divine retribution. In a flash, a massive 5-meter-wide meteor, trailing fire and tearing across the sky, hurtled down with terrifying momentum. But the shadow puppet leapt forward, arms extended. Dozens of thick strings burst from its hands and instantly wove into a dense web. With uncanny precision, it caught the meteor in the net, absorbing its kinetic energy and flinging it aside. Commander-in-Chief Kong roared, Doflamingo! You dare betray your master! Yet Doflamingo, still in an unformed string state inside the puppet, couldn't speak a word. He could only scream in his mind. It's not me. I didn't betray anyone. Roya took control of my puppet. Truly the definition of suffering in silence. And the puppet wasn't finished. It raised a hand and fired a bullet thread, aiming straight at Kong's face. Kong finally exploded. Attack! Kill all 4 of them full force. Fujitora had already braced himself, sword drawn horizontally as gravitational energy surged and accumulated at the blade. Just before the bullet thread reached them, he slashed down hard. Gravity blade, raging tiger. A devastating wave of compressed gravity surged outward, intercepting the thread and lashing back toward Roya. The bullet thread was torn from its path and whipped backward, riding the gravitational shockwave straight at the shadow puppet. The wave pulverized every ruin in its path, crushing them into powder. The resulting shock winds kicked up a massive dust cloud that covered everything. When the wave reached Roya, it erupted, unleashing chaotic gravitational pull that shredded everything nearby. Is it over? Kong asked, squinting into the churning cloud. Fujitora's expression suddenly twisted in shock. Everyone, fall back, he bellowed, instantly retreating at full speed. Then it happened. The dense smoke and dust behaved as if sucked into a vacuum, spiraling inward toward a single point. Seconds later, the battlefield was eerily clear, and floating in the air where the shockwave had hit was a tiny pebble the size of a fingertip. The shadow puppet caught the stone, then hurled it like a bullet. Dodge it! Fujitora screamed, panic gripping his voice. To him, through observation haki, that tiny pebble wasn't small at all. It was a monstrous sphere of energy, easily over 50 meters wide. The others stared at him like he was insane. Fujitora sprinted a full 100 meters away, coated himself in armament haki, and curled into a defensive crouch. Green Bull sneered, lifted his leg, and brought it down in a sharp axe kick, striking the pebble head-on. Shit, he cursed the moment his leg made contact. Because it wasn't a rock. It was a hypercompressed sphere of gravitational energy, a ticking bomb. The pebble exploded. Every grain of it radiated terrifying, concentrated force, firing outwards like thousands of hypervelocity projectiles. It became a storm of the most lethal shrapnel imaginable, blanketing the entire battlefield sector indiscriminately. In seconds, the buildings and terrain within that arc were leveled, obliterated. Green Bull struggled to stay upright but was clearly on the verge of collapse. His pristine navy uniform was gone. His body was riddled with holes, clean punctures from one end to the other. His right leg blasted clean off at the shin. Sweat poured from his face, rinsing away the blood that soaked him, forming a puddle beneath his trembling foot. Yet despite the severity of the wounds, his body began to regenerate at a speed visible to the naked eye. Such rapid healing was incredibly rare. Behind him, Kong stood in stunned silence. He had known Royal was powerful, had prepared the full might of the Navy's elite for this assault. Yet in a single exchange, the most resilient among them, Green Bull, was nearly killed outright. The three admirals were now frozen, completely intimidated. This wasn't a raid. It was a mass suicide. Fujitora, who had run far enough and fully shielded himself, remained unharmed. But his mind was filled with turbulent questions. That energy, it was clearly a gravity-based explosion formed by extreme compression. I haven't even mastered that technique yet. Could it be, the one using it was that shadow puppet Doflamingo? Then that means Roy really can replicate other people's powers. And not just mimicry, he surpasses the original. And it's not temporary, he can retain them indefinitely. If that's true, he might as well have every devil fruit power to himself. If someone like that ever chose to turn against the world, who could possibly stop him? Fujitora turned in dazed disbelief. His wide-open eyes were filled with nothing but white, seeing through Observation Haki. Everyone on the battlefield was overcome by fear. Everyone except Roya, who stood unbothered, radiating a calm and enigmatic presence he couldn't decipher. Then suddenly he saw it. A wave of malice surged violently from Kong's body, like black smoke erupting from a volcano. He didn't understand the source, but a sense of wrongness flooded Fujitora's mind. Did I make a mistake, joining the Navy? If even the Supreme Commander of all forces harbors such hatred and darkness, is the Navy truly fighting for justice? Then the scream came. A furious roar so loud it pierced his thoughts like a poisoned needle. It was Kong, red-faced and humiliated. Roya! How dare you destroy the scientific division's legacy? The gravitational blast had flattened everything within a wide arc of destruction. The bodies of the secret research staff, previously hidden beneath the ruins, were now fully exposed to all. Fujitora, being blind, couldn't see the corpses and thus remained unaware of the scene's horror. But Kizaru, Akainu, and Aokiji all took in the devastation beneath them at a glance. Akainu's brow furrowed deeply, a surge of fury and murderous intent exploding from him. Aokiji also frowned, though his attention shifted toward Commander-in-Chief Kong, who was seething with rage. Kizaru, however, seemed unsurprised by the sight below. With a faint smirk of disdain, he calmly pushed his glasses up with one hand. Kong suddenly snapped around and barked at the trio. Why aren't you moving? What are you waiting for? Roya to march into Mary Issei and slaughter the world government before you act? Before his words even finished, Akainu had already transformed into a massive torrent of magma, his fists launching rapid, explosive strikes like volcanic eruptions. Each blow flung molten lava bombs toward Roya in relentless waves. Your opponent is me. A sharp shout echoed from behind Akainu. It was Squard, fresh from his battle with Zephyr. As Squard arrived, the shadow string puppet leapt up, spinning another intricate spider web of threads. It caught and flung away all of Akainu's magma bombs in one sweeping motion, neutralizing the attack. Then, the puppet transformed into a long sword flying directly into Squard's hand. With a low grunt, Squard wrapped his armament haki around the thread-forged blade and delivered a simple, horizontal slash toward Akainu's midsection. Another slash to the waist. Akainu's eyes twitched. The pain of being bisected by Squard once before resurfaced instantly, and with it came shame and fury, fueling a more brutal retaliation. Both of his arms morphed into lava hounds, one striking high, the other low, biting at Squard from both angles. Squard snorted coldly and responded with two simultaneous slashes, perfectly targeting both hound heads. But unexpectedly, the lava hounds suddenly turned soft like water. The strikes deformed them badly, but the splashes of magma scattered in all directions. Instead of stopping the attack, Squard was forced to dodge the splashes, preventing him from continuing his offensive. Aquinas sneered, "Funny thing. I should be thanking you and your master. You pushed me to my limit, forced me to break through. Now I've reached the state of fire and water fusion." With a spin of his blade, Squard swept away all the magma droplets, then stabbed the sword forward. It pierced one of the hound head's midbite, and Squard immediately rotated the sword violently. The centrifugal force whipped the hound into chaos, tearing it into splashes of scattered magma. Another quick slash repeated the move, completely dismantling Aquinas' new technique in seconds. Just then, a voice called out from the direction Squard had come from. "Hey you! Let's settle this once and for all. There's no way my Black Arms armament haki can lose to yours." Zephyr had returned to the fight. This time, his right arm was completely encased in thick, pitch-black armament haki, surging with overwhelming power. From afar, he threw a straight punch, no tricks, just raw brute force. "You want to throw fists?" Jinbei roared as he jumped in. "Then I'll do it." His own straight punch met Zephyr's head-on, pouring all the frustration and rage he'd built up from being suppressed by Doflamingo's threads earlier. Their fists collided with a thunderous boom. The resulting shockwave radiated in all directions, centered on the two of them. Green Bull, whose body had only just finished healing from the earlier injuries, had yet to fully regrow his right leg. The shockwave lifted him off balance and sent him flying, spinning through the air. To make matters worse, he crash-landed face first, on top of one of the dead researchers. Overwhelming humiliation flooded his mind, smothering every last thread of rational thought. "You like throwing fists, huh?" Green Bull's right fist suddenly swelled, more than doubling in size. He launched it at Jinbei, who was still locked in a clash of punches with Zephyr. The howling wind behind the punch was terrifying, like a tiger pouncing from a mountaintop. But suddenly, a blood-red giant arm shot in from the side, grabbing Green Bull mid-air. Magellan had arrived. The crimson arm squeezed tight, bone-shattering cracks echoed through the air. When the grip loosened, Green Bull's body flopped limply to the ground, nothing more than a pile of shattered flesh. "Bastard! Die!" Green Bull used his head as leverage to prop himself up. Even with his bones crushed, his monstrous regeneration kicked in again, this time, even faster than before. Bones twitched and shifted beneath his skin, reconnecting and realigning automatically. His right leg regenerated before their eyes. Magellan clicked his tongue. "That's some ridiculous vitality. Kinda jealous, honestly." He didn't wait, his blood-colored giant arm struck again, grabbing Green Bull tightly once more. The poison giant within Magellan's body feeds on the life force of others to sustain itself. Normally, Magellan had to fuel it with his own vitality. But Green Bull was like a walking energy battery, and the poison giant was practically drooling. Feeling the vicious malice of the poison giant, Green Bull gritted his teeth and pushed all his limbs outward, barely withstanding the crushing grip. It was only thanks to his unique ability, every time he recovered from an injury, the affected area grew significantly stronger, that he wasn't crushed again outright. But no matter how hard he tried, he was completely overpowered. The poison giant clenched him like a steel marble, at a loss on how to destroy him effectively. So it just punched its other fist into its own palm, smashing Green Bull between the two. The sheer brutal shockwaves reverberated between both fists, violently compounding over and over. Crushed between them, Green Bull's bones shattered into even finer fragments, piercing every inch of muscle tissue. His internal organs were shredded, nearly liquefied by the force. The crimson hand released him and Green Bull fell like dead weight to the ground. He gasped for breath, his body waiting silently to regenerate once again. His eyes, once filled with fury, now held only emptiness. Then a flash of platinum lightning. McGuy appeared at Kizaru's side. Kizaru gave a tired sigh. "Sigh, please stop bothering me. I'm already slacking so hard they're gonna fire me." McGuy laughed heartily. "Admiral Kizaru, why don't we slack off together? Just a light spar, no serious injuries, what do you say?" As he spoke, the longsword in his hand began to hum violently, and a blinding platinum thunderlight burst into the sky. It formed a thick lightning column in the air, then suddenly exploded, splitting into tens of thousands of agile electric serpents, all racing toward Kizaru. Kizaru's wry smile twisted deeper into bitterness. So this is just a light spar? If he actually held back, he'd be fried to ash in an instant. Quickly, he clapped his hands together, summoning an 8-foot mirror to shield himself. Then, with a spring of his legs, he lashed out with a light-speed kick aimed at McGuy's knee. But McGuy only grinned slyly. "Gotcha." At the same time, his lightning-channeling sword suddenly slashed downward. Kizaru's kick, meant to strike, now looked like it was volunteering to be cleaved. Even worse, the serpents of lightning no longer guided by the sword still surged with perfect precision. They circled around Kizaru's 8-foot mirror and struck from behind right as he was retracting his kick and couldn't dodge. In a flash, countless serpents of lightning invaded his back, sending volts through every cell of his body. His entire frame spasmed uncontrollably. Finally, he collapsed. After a long pause, he gasped out. Your observation haki, it's already developed to the point where you can predict my attacks. McGuy shrugged. Our master's strongest trait is his observation haki. If we, his subordinates, don't train like hell in that area, how could we ever stay at his side? Kizaru froze for a second, then let out a deep sigh and flopped onto the ground, completely relaxed. Let the others keep killing each other. Justice or not, it's all just someone else's slogan in the end. Nearby, Aokiji, who had been quietly watching all this time, suddenly asked. You know what they're really doing here? Kizaru answered lazily, nope. Don't care to find out, either. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's shady. Maybe this place just matters a little more than the rest. Otherwise, the old commander-in-chief wouldn't be this frantic. Aokiji exhaled deeply, then looked at McGuy. Alright then. Could you give me a light tap too? McGuy rolled his eyes and lazily flicked his sword, sending a slow-moving arc of electricity toward Aokiji. Aokiji returned the eye roll, but waited. When the arc finally reached him, a dramatic explosion of frost shards erupted from his body. To outsiders, it looked like he'd just taken a lethal blow, his elemental form nearly shredded apart. He spun dramatically through the air and landed beside Kizaru. Kizaru grimaced. Bro, the way you're faking this injury is way too convincing. You're making me look bad. McGuy chuckled. What's the point of appearances? When this is all over, the one who gets to tell the story, is whoever makes it back alive. Aokiji and Kizaru blinked, then exchanged wry smiles. He was right. Given the current situation, Roya had no reason to let any of them leave. So the two admirals stayed put, waiting for the endgame to unfold. Elsewhere, Akainu and Squard were still exchanging blows, locked in a fierce stalemate. Akainu had reduced his offensive power to reinforce his body, making him more resistant to blade attacks. Squard, meanwhile, was still unfamiliar with his new thread blade, and he had to be cautious, not wanting to harm Doflamingo, who was still imprisoned within the weapon. As McGuy defeated two admirals in a row, Squard grew increasingly impatient. He forced Akainu back with a sweeping slash, then re-sheathed his blade, dropping into his most powerful Iaido, quick draw, stance. Akainu sensed something was off, but didn't dare press the attack. Little did he know, that hesitation was exactly what Squard needed. Squard twisted his wrist, his thread blade began to morph with his will. In an instant, the sword transformed into a spiked warhammer, bristling with vicious points. Akainu's eyes widened, a trap. Before he could react, the weapon came crashing down in a howling arc straight for his skull. This kind of spiked blunt weapon was the perfect counter to his current form. Even a glancing blow would shear away large portions of his magma body. And every droplet of magma represented his vitality. If too much magma was scattered and not reclaimed, even Akainu wouldn't survive the loss. In desperation, he instantly shifted his magma composition. His exterior hardened into a crust of burning rock to withstand the hammer's physical blow. His interior liquefied even more to absorb and dissipate the impact shock. Thanks to his extreme mastery of his devil fruit, Akainu transformed in an instant. The hammer was still over a meter away when he completed the change. It seemed Squard's unfamiliarity with heavy weapons was slowing him down significantly. For the first time, Akainu gained the upper hand, and relief surged through him. Why not press it further? He condensed more magma around his right fist, forming his own massive hammer, and swung it at Squard's weapon with full force. But the moment his strike launched, Akainu noticed a mocking glint in Squard's eyes. A sudden chill ran down his spine. And then, he saw it. Squard's weapon had transformed again back into a blindingly sharp blade. His current hardened form, optimized for withstanding blunt trauma, was completely vulnerable to cutting attacks. Akainu panicked, trying to change form again, but it was far too late. Slash! 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 The light of the blade flickered violently. Akainu felt his body lighten. Before he even realized how many times he'd been cut, a powerful kick to the chest sent him flying. He crashed to the ground, dazed only to look up and see, lying a dozen meters away at Squard's feet, 4 severed limbs. With dread, Akainu turned to glance at his own arms and legs. Only to find 4 clean, flat stumps. His limbs had been sliced clean off. From the moment Squard had sheathed his blade and assumed that Iaido stance, he had set the trap perfectly.